All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a tour of a new kind of world. Not a place you can fly to, but entire digital nations. And they've got their own, very real economies. I want you to forget everything you think you know about, simple in-game points. We're talking about complex systems with real-world value, actual jobs, and yeah, real consequences. So let's take a look at the blueprint for these new digital worlds.
And that quote right there, it just nails it. The key to understanding all of this is to stop thinking of these places as games or simple markets. They are living, breathing ecosystems. Once you get that in your head, everything else starts to make sense. How they grow, how they can totally collapse, and how they're already changing our world. So, to understand any ecosystem, you've got to start with the basics, right? Its anatomy. And what's fascinating is that it doesn't matter if it's some huge fantasy world or a high-tech blockchain universe. Turns out every single one of these virtual economies is built on 4 foundational pillars. Let's break them down. Okay, first up, you absolutely need a currency. This is the lifeblood of the whole system. It's what allows value to flow everywhere. Think of things like Robux and Roblox or Mana and Decentraland. These digital currencies are behind every single transaction. And here's the crucial part. Their value is carefully protected by controlling the supply, which gives the entire economy a stable footing to stand on. Next, you have digital assets. So if the currency is the blood, then these assets are like the natural resources of this new world. We're talking about things you can actually verifiably own, like a plot of virtual land, a one-of-a-kind character skin, or a collectible NFT. These are the things people actually want, the stuff they create and own and trade. This is the substance of the economy.
Of course, none of this works without rules. This is the ecosystem's DNA. These rules, they can be written right into the code by the developers, or they can be enforced by smart contracts, which are basically just self-executing agreements that nobody can tamper with. And what's really interesting is that in more and more of these worlds, the rules are decided by the community through something called a DAO. Think of it like a club where all the members vote on the rules. It's all about creating predictability and, most importantly, trust.
And the final pillar, and this one's a big one, is scarcity. Now, this is where the digital world completely flips the script on how we think about economics. See, in our world, scarcity is just a fact of life. But in a virtual world, you can copy anything 1,000,000 times with a click. So scarcity has to be deliberately engineered. Developers have to decide, okay, there will only ever be 100 of these legendary swords, or only 10,000 plots of land. That artificial limit, that's the invisible force that turns a bunch of pixels into a seriously prized possession.
So we've got our 4 pillars: currency, assets, rules, and scarcity. But, a pile of ingredients sitting on a counter doesn't make a meal. Where do they all come together to create that living, breathing economy we talked about? Well, that brings us to the marketplace, the very heart of the ecosystem, the thing that pumps value through every single participant.
You can think of these marketplaces as the bustling town squares of the digital frontier. I mean, whether it's the Axie Infinity marketplace, where people are trading these little crypto creatures, or some auction house inside a giant game, this is where the magic happens. It's where supply finally meets demand, where creators find their audience, and where you can literally feel the economic pulse of that world.
So how does a digital sword or a piece of art get its price tag? Well, it's kind of like a 3-step dance. First, you just have basic supply and demand. That sets the stage. Then, as people actually start buying and selling, the whole community engages in this collective process called price discovery. They're all figuring out together what this thing is really worth. And then finally, speculation jumps into the mix. People start buying assets not just to use them, but because they hope the value goes up. And that adds a whole layer of risk and reward that feels a lot like Wall Street.
And this whole process shows us something absolutely crucial. A healthy market is not just about the code. Yeah, you need the technology, like blockchain, to prove who owns what and to keep transactions secure. But what's just as important are the social parts. Things like trust systems, seller ratings, and just strong community rules against scams. It's that partnership between tech and trust that makes people feel safe enough to even show up and participate.
Okay, so we get how the market works day to day. Now let's zoom out a bit. What's the difference between one of these digital nations that thrives for a decade versus one that just collapses in a month? Well, it all comes down to how it handles growth, who's in charge, and that ever-present shadow of risk.
So who makes the rules? This is one of the biggest questions out there, and you basically see 2 main answers. On one hand, you've got the centralized model. That's where the original developers hold all the power. Their goal is usually stability and control.
On the other hand, you've got a decentralized model, where control is actually handed over to the community, usually through those DAOs we mentioned. Here, the goal is all about collective ownership. And let me tell you, each path comes with some massive trade-offs.
So what actually makes these economies boom? It's really driven by three big forces. First, just simple user participation. The more people that join, the more activity, the more value. Makes sense. Second is platform innovation. The creators have to keep things fresh with new stuff to do, new features. And third, and this is the real game changer, real-world integration. When the digital money you earn can actually pay your real-world rent, the whole system becomes infinitely more powerful.
But let's be really clear here. These are not digital utopias, not by a long shot. They face the exact same risks as any real-world economy. You've got speculative bubbles that can pop and lead to just devastating crashes. Hackers and scammers are a constant threat. And yeah, just like in the real world, wealth can get concentrated in the hands of a few early players really fast, creating huge gaps between the haves and have-nots. Navigating these dangers is key to survival.
Okay, so let's bring all this home. What does the rise of all these complex ecosystems actually mean for us right now? Well, the biggest takeaway is that the line between the virtual world and the real world is just dissolving. It's happening way faster than I think any of us expected.
And look, this isn't some science fiction prediction. It is happening as we speak. You have play-to-earn models that are creating legitimate full-time digital jobs for people all over the globe. We are right on the edge of having truly interconnected economies, a metaverse, where you can take your stuff from one world to another. All of this is fundamentally rewriting our definitions of what work is, what ownership is, and even what a community is.
And that right there, that leads to the most important point of this entire thing. In these new economies, you're not just a consumer, you're not just a player. Every single trade you make, every item you decide to build, every vote you cast in one of those DAOs, you are actively shaping the health and the future of that entire world. You're a citizen, you're a stakeholder, you are a co-creator.
Which leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? As these virtual worlds get tangled up in the fabric of our real lives, are we really building a more open, more fair, more decentralized future together? Or are we just getting really good at playing a much more sophisticated game that someone else designed? It's something to think about as we all take our first steps into this new frontier.